William Clegg thinks that Turkey or Turkish regime is now breaching human rights, European Convention of Human Rights. Which article specifically he highlights?
Particularly with Article 5, Article 6, and Article 7. Article 5 is about arbitrary detention. It is actually a universal human rights declaration article. It says everybody has the right to freedom, and nobody can be detained or arrested without legal basis. Clegg, again, refers to Thomas Moore's report, refers to the case of X, and suggests that since the use of IP addresses to determine who actually used Bylog is unacceptable as a strategy to determine the identity of the person, this means that whoever is being detained on claim of use of Bylog is actually arbitrarily detained in Turkey. There is arbitrary detention here. And he continues on adding having a bank account in Bankasya at a time which it was not even claimed by the government that it was illegal. It was actually under regulations of the government authorities, supported by the government authorities at that time. And many pro-government people had bank accounts in Bankasya. Clegg mentions even some state companies, state-owned companies, had their accounts in Bankasya.
Including Turkish Airlines, yes.
At such a time, having a bank account in Bankasya cannot be used as an evidence, he says, or staying in a student accommodation facility. And he actually puts Donald Trump into the report and says, Donald Trump does have a lot of hotels in all over the world. Can we claim that anybody who stayed in one of his hotels are actually supporting Donald Trump's philosophy? We cannot. Precisely in the same way, anybody who stayed in a Gülenist or Gülen sympathizers accommodation does not necessarily become a member of the Gülenist organization, he says. He continues on and mentions reading a particular newspaper also cannot be used as identifying membership to an organization. So using any one of these or all of them altogether is, according to him, is arbitrary detention, and it is a clear breach of Article 5 of the European Human Rights Convention.
But you also said Article 6 was breached as well. So what is that about?
Article 6 is about fair trial. Article 6 says that the court has to be independent, shouldn't take orders from other authorities, and all evidences has to be transparent, and the accused has to be able to, defend himself or herself, has to be able to reach to the information about what and with what kind of information they are being sued, and so on. And it says that Clegg deals with this issue in several paragraphs of his report. It says that particularly the case X, he says, that I have in my hand as an evidence, is obviously not a fair trial because of use of MIT report. It makes already a false report being used as an evidence in the courthouse. It actually underlines it actually makes the assertion of fair trial problematic. And it says the accused person has to have the right to examine or have others examine the witnesses against him. When you don't know who was the author of a report that is used against you, how can you examine the report? How can you ask questions about it? When the report does not underline how the information was actually taken from Lithuanian server, whether it was modified or not. And he underlines Thomas Moore's findings that there were certain modifications in the information when it was brought to MIT to be examined. So under such conditions, you cannot examine it. it is certainly a breach of fair trial principle, he says, but also he underlines, fair trial can be by means of methodology, or it can be by means of the overall legality of the court cases. And in this case, he suggests that, in fact, it seems that the overall Gülenist cases, 75,000 of them, or whatever the number, seems to be unfair altogether. So when it comes to the European Human Rights Court, the court may find it necessary to deal with the totality of the cases, he says, because it seems that it's not just one use of evidence, it is altogether, the case itself is altogether unfair. So there is no judicial independence. He quotes from United States State Department's report on human rights issues. He refers to Human Rights Watch and Amnesty's reports about how many thousands of lawyers and judges being sacked from their positions, or advocates defending the Gülenist or alleged Gülenist being also arrested, and so on. These are all underlining a problem by means of fairness of Turkish judicial systems, he says, and this is certainly a breach of Article 6.
So that brings us to, you also mentioned that there is a breach of Article 3. And
in fact, before Article 3, there is Article 7. Article 7 is about the retrospective legislation. You already have mentioned this without giving the article's name, and Clegg is right in saying that in the case of X downloaded Bylog before May 2016. This is the month when the Turkish National Security Council declared Gülen movement an illegal terrorist organization. And Clegg doesn't enter into that questioning that declaration, but only underlines that this is a political decision. This is not a courthouse decision. Despite that, he says, before any kind of membership to Gülen movement was perfectly legal before May 2016. Only after then you can question people why you continued on supporting this movement and so on.
Or if you want to make your case, this is the time, May 2016 is when it is defined as illegal. So after this, any relationship can be maybe used or discussed that it can be used as a membership of it, but it can't be traced back as retrospectively.
Yes, exactly. And Clegg says that what is happening here, X is actually detained and arrested for alleged crimes that were defined to be crimes after they were perpetrated. So you do something when it is perfectly legal. Later on, the authority comes and says, well, this is illegal, but then comes to you and says you are under arrest because of a thing that was not a crime when you did it. And this is unacceptable, he says. This is a clear breach of Article 7 that deals with unacceptability of retrospective legislation. Other than these, he also deals with two more articles, and he doesn't give evidence on these issues because he says, unfortunately, the evidence is not yet well collected. There are just speculations about these issues. One is Article 3, which relates to torture, and the other one is Article 9, is about the failure to permit in the courthouses the discussion about the aims and the objectives of the Gülen movement. Meaning, if the courthouse itself doesn't discuss the claim that Gülen movement is a terrorist organization, and if the courthouse directly accepts this as an axiomatic or established fact because it was a political decision taken in the National Security Council, then this is a breach of Article 9, says Clegg. In both cases, Clegg suggests that European Human Rights Convention is breached, but in Article 3 case, meaning torture case, he says, unfortunately, we have only speculations, or we have only news, credible news coming to Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch about people being tortured through, sleep deprivation, or in some cases even rape or sexual misconduct and so on. But he says, unfortunately, these reports lack the names of the people who do torture people, or whether they are taking orders from their superior authorities and so on. If one day, he says, we have names of the people who perpetrate the torture and who ordered torturing, then the issue becomes a universal human rights issue, and there is no need to go to European Human Rights Court. Then any free countries' courts, including United Kingdom's courts, can open cases against these people, because then it will become a crime against humanity, not only in the jurisdiction of European Human Rights Court, he says.
Like Mr. X or someone else have been tortured in Turkey and somehow get out and knows who have tortured him or on whose order he was tortured, he'll be actually open a lawsuit against him in any other country, because that is a universal human rights breach. Okay, so I want